I promised you this one a long time ago, and I took my time just because I wanted to make sure that there were no stones unturned. A system is what we climb on. A method is how we climb. This system, which is a 50-foot length of rope with a JRB Cinch on each end and with a compact Longhorn Agile on each end, is a climbing system. That along with this Maverick pole. I'm going to execute a climb today, which is an alternating anchor climb. I'm going to set an anchor on the tree, I'll climb to it, I'll set another anchor, I'll climb to it, I'll set a third anchor and climb to it. It is very similar to the method I call JRB Hitch Climbing. It's identical, in fact, with the exception of the fact that I am using the JRB Cinch instead of the Maverick hitch. I am offering this system and the method you'll see today as an alternative to the JRB Hitch Climbing with the Maverick for that audience who still wants to climb safely. They still want to climb a rope-based system with no slack, but they don't feel comfortable tying a life-sustaining knot in the woods. So instead of the Maverick, we're substituting the JRB Cinch. I'm going to start to put together the system. And we're not going to zoom in real tight or anything here because you know these components. There are supporting videos for everything, and I will leave links in the video description to ensure that you can locate them. This is the JRB Cinch, specifically the recently updated version. I call it JRB Cinch 2024. It has some improvements over the prior version, and those improvements really aren't going to be needed today. But in certain situations, when we are climbing a more complex tree with a lot of branches and snags, there can be issues in recovery of the system. We will hit those in a future video. But I wanted you to have some background in terms of why I didn't execute this climb a few years ago. So I've got my JRB Cinch, and as per the recent video on advancing it and retrieving it, I'm going to use my Maverick pole and walk it up the tree. Now I set it on the tree. I'm going to let my Maverick pole just hang there. Further down on the system, this is my compact Longhorn Agile hitch, and I separate it from the end by about 2 wingspans or 12 feet, which is roughly the right amount before I climb. The other side of the system is identical. I take my Longhorn Agile bridge and I shorten it fully, as compact as I can get it. And note that I'm wearing my platform. We'll stick that on the tree somewhere around 20 feet or so. I take the compact Longhorn Agile and I engage my primary bridge, which again is as short as I can get it. And I grab my JRB Garda Hitch foot loop, which I'm running in the short mode and using the transformation loop. And I clip that on. And the last piece of business before I get started is I take my redundant short bridge and connect it to the best friend loop. And before I start the climb, I'm going to tell you the 10 attributes of this climbing system, or this climb you're about to see, which I believe make it unique. And it's not any one of these conditions, it's the combination of all of them together. If someone's done something like this, let me know. But I have never seen anyone execute a climb which is, number one, it's on a single rope. So I've got a single rope and I'll be climbing with 0 slack, and 100% of the time I'm tied into the tree. I don't know how I can fall given that. Number two, I always will have a rappel path. My rope is on the tree, it's rappel capable. If for any reason I needed to get out of the tree, I would simply abort and rappel at that time. I've got a line to ground. I am not using any footing devices like sticks or steps or ladders or anything like that. I also have no foot dependency. That means that even though I use a foot loop, I can't, if my foot were, not that it can slip out, but I can't slip. I'm never dependent on my feet for my safety. I can't lose my footing and be in trouble. Number five, I'm not using any of the typical devices that saddle hunters think they need and think make them safe, like a tether or a lineman's belt. I won't be using a positioning lanyard. I'm not using any of that stuff. In terms of executing the SRT climb, I don't have any mechanical devices. Most arborists would tell you it's impossible to climb SRT on just friction hitches. We've proved that wrong. I will not rely on anything that I can drop. This pole I could drop, no big deal. My safety's not affected. Nothing that I am climbing on that is needed for my safety can be dropped. I'm rope climbing without the use of a throw ball. Okay, so that's the first 9. Those 9 items have all been covered before. I've accomplished 1 through 9 with my JRB hitch climbing on the Maverick. What makes this unique in number 10 is that I didn't need to tie any knots at the tree. No knots are tied at the climb site in order for me to execute this climb. And so with that, let me get started. If you've watched my JRB hitch climbing, and I urge that you take a look at that playlist and the most recent versions thereof, this is going to look absolutely the same. I'm simply doing an old school SRT using the Garda hitch foot loop. I think I might have missed one of the 10 points there, and that is that I have redundancy. One of the 10 points is that I have redundant points of connection to my rope at all times. I tried to memorize those, but I'm not sure how good a job I did. But we're a one-take operation here at JRB tree climbing. Okay, so I've gotten about as high as I can get. And by the way, this tree is indicated, this is the 10-foot mark, and so this hitch is about 12.5 feet. I'm going to grab my other JRB Cinch. I'm going to place it on the tree. I'm going to grab that Maverick pole, which is right where I need it, and I'll start advancing this. So in terms of being quiet, this system has the possibility of a clink. If I allow that pole to contact the carabiner, that can make noise. So you'll learn quickly, if you're using this in a hunting situation, you always want to be pulling away from the tree. Pulling away from the tree. And now I'll push up while pulling down, and I'm trying not to have any contact of metal on metal. A little wiggle to get that set. Okay, now I need to simply transfer onto the other system. And I will do that by first getting my bridge fully horizontal. Engaging the upper, turn that around so you might have a preferred hand, so I prefer to take slack out with the right and put my system in that way. So now I simply execute a transfer. You can see I'm taking slack out. I have now loaded the upper hitch. Cinch, I should say. I move my Garda hitch over. Now, I'll confess it's a little crowded right here. You've got to keep it an eye on what you're doing. But I put my garter hitch on the upper hitch, and I remove the lower cinch. And I repeat. There's a test we call the whistle test in climbing, and it would be pretty boring to watch me pass the whistle test. But the whistle test is a test where the climbing instructor blows a whistle at any time, and the climber has to let go. You got to let go. Just go limp, and you always have to be safe. Well, you're not going to pass that test if you're holding on for dear life, and if your bridge isn't connected to the tree on zero slack at all times. It's not about what we can do, it's about what we can do reliably, repeatably, and in adverse conditions. This is the cinch that was number 1. Number 2 is on the tree. I'm going to put on number 3, but obviously I've already climbed this fully, so I have to put a little slack in the system. How much? About 3 arm spans. 1, 2, 3 should do. Put my cinch on the tree. Grab my pole. It is easier to grab that pole out of a JRB cinch than a Maverick. That's one advantage with the cinch. At this point, I don't need my pole anymore, and so I'll collapse it and wear it the rest of the ride. Execute a transfer. I stand up as high as I can, get my bridge horizontal, take as much slack as I can out of the upper tie-in. Sit down on it to weight it and take a little out of the lower one. And then I'll move my foot loop. There's a little judgment here involved in terms of where you want to set your platform. You've got to have a pretty good judgment in terms of how much room you like. I like my tie-in around 6 feet above it, and so I'm going to set my platform here. Can't drop it. Of course, I don't need it, but I can't drop it. It's around my neck. See my video on platform attachment with mechanical advantage. Works on any platform with a button. I'm going to set it at around 21 feet. The thing I like about this platform attachment method is I'm pulling myself closer to the tree, and that's just a more natural feeling for a rope climber. I'll leave it up so I can climb past it more easily. Now that I'm past it, I'll set it on the tree a little bit. Okay, once I'm at height, I'll lengthen my bridge to get comfortable. But I'm careful not to let too much slack in my system, so I do it in stages. We always want slack to be an absolute minimum. We're always waiting for a failure of whatever our feet are on. Let's tow hook that platform. Okay, here I am. So obviously we would spend our time here. I've got redundancy, right? I got two bridges attached to my climbing line at all times. Folks will regularly ask me, what do I do with my climbing rope while I am at height? And so maybe we'll do a special video on that. But I'll just drape it over my platform, or I'll put a saddle hunter's hitch on the tree. You can also drape it in your tether for the JRB Cinch. We're not going to waste time with any of that. I'm going to get on with rappel. If you prefer to remove your garter hitch during the hunt, I immediately put in a Munter friction hitch. Let me get my foot loop out of the way. You can leave it on or take it off. It's not, now that I've ascended, I don't need my foot loop anymore. If I've removed it, if I dropped it, it wouldn't affect me. But I always will put in that Munter or a super Munter on my lower bridge so that I have some amount of redundancy. If my friction hitch, for example, started to slip during a climb, and this has nothing to do with hitch climbing, I'm always ready to get to the ground. I'm in rappel mode. Okay. I am reaching into my saddle bag and I'm grabbing my retrieval line. And as I showed you in the detailed explanation of the JRB Cinch, because I have either webbing or tape on my cinch to kind of keep it quiet, I'm going to rotate this carabiner. I'm going to temporarily unload it, rotate it, so that the smooth end is going to engage the rope. Put my retrieval line on. I'm going to let that helicopter pass. Okay, now here's a detail you don't need to worry about with the Maverick or the JRB hitch, but I'm going to double check my retrieval path, meaning when I pull down, I need to walk away from the tree. Well, there's a lot of pricker bushes back behind me. I want to walk towards the camera, and so I'm going to rotate my cinch slightly. I'm going to rotate it towards the camera. That's going to help me in two ways, because I won't be interfering with my platform, and that's the direction I want to walk when I retrieve my cinch. Okay, let me step off the platform and initiate rappel. See my video, single rope rappel on the Munter friction hitch. Let's get this bridge clean before I do so. Let's stop and grab our platform. Resume rappel. Always come down slowly and rappel. We can feel heat build up, and we don't want any of that. My friction hitch, I can tend it with just 2 fingers. It's not providing much friction. The majority of the friction is being absorbed by the Munter variant. Okay, so I am going to direct your attention as I approach you. I'm going to direct your attention up to the canopy, to the cinch, so you can zoom in on that. Okay, so now you can tell where I am. I'm going to start pulling on the carabiner. And again, it's a two-stage release. See what happened there? Now, on a tree like this, where I really don't have any branches, I can pretty reliably assume that that's going to fall. But if, and we'll do future videos on this, if there were a lot of branches on the tree, I would need to be very careful that I don't send anything up into the tree, like my friction hitches, and that I pull it down far enough to get to that carabiner. The more complex scenarios are in the more complex trees. You know, given that I'm going to climb on this again, I'd like to have my friction hitches in roughly the right spot. So roughly that's one wingspan, two wingspans. I want my other friction hitch right here. That's where I want it for the next climb. And so let's just get it there. Call this a system reset. I don't have to worry about this with DSRT. Everything seems to be roughly where I want it to be. That's close enough. Let's check the other side. I don't like to make anything look easier than it is. I like to be realistic. I like to anticipate all the questions that you might have and ensure that they're answered in my videos. Here's how I coil the system. So this is one end. I am going to grab this carabiner and let this cinch fall, and I'll make the approximate size of my coil, and I'll be making a butterfly coil, alternating positions, left and right. And when I get to that next carabiner, I assume it with my finger as well. Continue the coil. We don't want those carabiners jingling together or touching the rings. There's 4 carabiners and 2 rings on this system. And by the way, I used one of my least favorite ropes I sacrificed here. This is Sterling Superstatic 2. It's quite stiff and it's got a rugged sheath. And it's not my favorite rope, but that's okay. I know that it's a strong and safe rope. I can get a little better performance with some of the more modern ropes, but it doesn't really matter. If you've got a good 50-foot rope, and that's what this is, you can climb to normal hunting height. Okay, once I've got about 6 feet left, I begin to coil this entire mess and bind it together. I'll give it about 3 or 4 wraps. Until I have just enough rope to stuff a bite through the coil, through all the carabiners, and poke it out the other side. That's all that's left. And I take this carabiner and engage it. So now I've got the system coiled, and you could shake that and it's not going to jingle. And of course most folks carry a backpack. I don't. I can wear this on my bridge over my back, and all I need to worry about is the pole, and I typically have that on sling as well. All right, guys, you know my style, one take. We'll do more climbs. You're going to have some questions. You're going to say, hey, well, can I use this with a stick? Absolutely. If you feel more comfortable using climbing sticks, you can use this system in conjunction with one or more climbing sticks and climb with no slack. I probably will make that next. You can climb a tree that has branches. Yes, it's going to be more complicated because we might need to make an extra move. We might need to make smaller moves. It'll vary based on the number of branches. But once we get to a tree that's got a lot of branches, I'm gonna scratch my head and say, well, why didn't I just rope climb this using a DSRT or similar method? This method is better, just like hitch climbing, for a tree that doesn't have a lot of branches. And of course, my universal system, I'm capable of executing the same climb just with the Maverick hitch instead of the JRB Cinch. And that system is capable of SRT and DSRT as well, where this one is focused strictly on climbing roughly the way I showed. There is a possibility to use it for SRT, but I'm going to hold off on that. That's way too big a topic for this evening. We're running out of daylight. Thank you guys. I appreciate your support. Let me know if you have any questions.